We're going, we're live. Okay, well, welcome everybody. We are learning how to do a probably new method to all of you, which is called dry brining. So you've probably heard of brining before, which involves like salt water, right? That you dunk your turkey into, then you have to find space in your fridge to put a humongous turkey in a whole bunch of salt water. And you think, how could this possibly make sense? That's why there's such a thing as dry brining, which is essentially rubbing your turkey or your chicken in salt and just letting it sit open, uncovered on like a sheet rack in a sheet pan overnight. So I'm going to show you what the cooked turkey looks, the cooked chicken, gotta use the right poultry words here, looks like. So we're going to take its temperature, and because I was overambitious and it's cooking really quickly. And then we will launch into how to do the raw bird. Okay, here we go. Notice the smoke coming out of my oven because, okay. I covered this with a little bit of foil because it was browning so nicely. Probably the first thing you'll notice is that this doesn't look like your normal chicken. It's very flat. And that is because it has been what you'd either call spatchcocked or butterflied. I prefer the term spatchcocked because it is so fun to say. All right. So what I'm doing is I'm taking the temperature and the deepest part of the breast. So these are the chicken breasts here. And I'm shoving it in a good inch or two so it's close to the bone. You want it solidly in there, like no tiny pricks into it. We want it in there. And it is reading at 130 degrees. So it is not cooked yet. You probably have heard to cook your chicken to 165. I guess probably, yeah. That is actually way overcooked for most chicken. The idea is if you get it to 165, it will kill any possible pathogens like salmonella, whatever, in like instantaneously. But here's a little food science nugget for you guys. You can actually cook your chicken to a lower temperature for a little bit longer and like hold it at that temperature, and it will kill any of the nasties that might make you ill. So that is essentially how you achieve not overcooked poultry. If it's anything, I don't know. My grandma would make a turkey every year by the turkey popper, like the little, you know, the thing, the little red thing that you wait for it to pop. And we wondered why it was sawdust every single year that needed to be glued together by gravy. And that's why, because it's essentially a lovely thing that poultry producers put in so they won't get sued about people getting sick from their turkey. So it purposely overcooks it to make sure you would never have a chance of getting salmonella or campylobacter. So yeah, any questions, by the way, about temping a turkey? You saw I went into the deepest part of the breast. It wasn't cooked, so I'm putting it back in. And next, we will, when we take it out in a few minutes for like 10 minutes or something like that, we will also check the thigh. We're just going for the biggest parts and sticking it in a fair ways. Fairly straightforward.
If anyone has questions as we go along and you don't want to interrupt, if you type it in the chat, I will bring it up to Loy at a normal break. Or obviously right now, if anyone has questions, because she is asking for questions. But
so what temperature are you recommending then?
Temperature for it to be cooked to, or temperature that it's being cooked at?
Be cooked to.
Cooked to. Okay, so I'm looking for breasts to be cooked in between 150 and 155 degrees. Like if you can get it up to 150, great. If it's up to 155, don't sweat it. It's not overcooked yet. And thighs, I'm looking for 175 and above. The awesome thing about thighs, because it's dark meat, is that it takes a lot to overcook it. You actually want to cook it more because the thigh, because it's their little legs, has a lot more tendons and fat, and it's the dark meat. It's where the blood was running more. That's why it's called that. Their breasts, which is weird to talk about, don't do a lot of anything. Most commercial birds, but their legs do. And so you actually want to cook it more to kind of melt and gelatinize the tendons and everything in it. So normally what I will do is I will check the breast, and if the breast is up to temperature, because we have laid it flat, which I'll demonstrate in a minute, it cooks so evenly that you don't end up with like raw drumsticks and an overcooked breast, which is kind of the beauty of spatchcocking or butterflying. I'm going to say spatchcocking because, like I said, it's really fun to say. You don't get to say fun like words like that often. Yeah, so that answer your question, Denise? Okay. Oh, the other thing that's like kind of essential, you guys all need to own an instant read thermometer. So like not one that takes 10 seconds to read it, like it's slowly coming up from 100, creeping up to like 150. That's not going to cut it. Those are inaccurate, and they're also really annoying just to use. This thermometer I got from Amazon for $30, $20. You can find all sorts of expensive ones, and I'll put probably a link to this, but it has a nice little probe you can stick in, and it reads in about 3 seconds or less. Incredibly useful, like invaluable for cooking meat. I can't stress that enough. If you take away one thing from this entire demonstration, is you should have a good thermometer and you should use it all the time when you're cooking meat, especially if it's large pieces of meat. Yeah, so I will link to that, but yeah, instant read thermometer, probe style, not like a candy thermometer or something. Yeah. Okay. I'm assuming you guys want to learn how to spatchcock. So this is a chicken. Maybe you can tell where I bought this from, Costco. So these are 99 cents a pound. Something that's kind of cool about this chicken actually is that it is air chilled and it hasn't been injected with saline solution, which almost all turkeys and poultry have been injected with a saline solution, so they can essentially sell you more water, and it will hopefully keep your turkeys and chickens more moist. It's not like that's a bad thing necessarily, but it does mean that they're a lot juicier when you take them out of, and if you ever have really like juicy chicken, it's because of that. So anyways, really high quality chicken actually, 99 cents a pound at Costco, would recommend. Okay, so I'm gonna take this over to the sink. No one needs to see me open the package, but we're gonna open up this chicken and I'm gonna bring it over here and I'll show you what we do next. Any questions right now, by the way, while I am chattering about opening up my chicken?
How many pounds is that one?
This guy, I think this one was like 4.5 pounds. So pretty typical size. I think most chickens run, and there's like different sizes, but like this guy, 4.5 pounds. The other one in the package was like more like 4 pounds, it's just slightly smaller. And yeah, turkeys, I'll get into this in a second. So this is a great question about size of chickens. So I just want to show, look how this chicken isn't just like oozing everywhere. It's kind of, it's really nice. It's a good chicken. And I'm probably going to say that too much. But turkeys, with this method I'm going to show you with spatchcocking or butterflying, it's easiest if they are no larger than 14 to 15 pounds. Admittedly, the awesome thing about COVID this year is we're unlikely to be doing large family separate celebrations. And so it's not as difficult to do a smaller turkey.
I have a question, Loy.
Yes.
I've heard, like my mom taught me to rinse the chicken when I take it out of the package, and then I've heard never to rinse the chicken. So is there
Don't do it.
Like, why was I taught that? Is that like weird? Is that just me that was taught that?
It's, if you were slaughtering your own chicken and like defeathering it, yeah, sure, go ahead and rinse it. It might have some weirdness left over, but all of these chickens have been essentially dipped like in like a sanitizing solution. I mean, it's like a little extreme, but essentially they're as clean as raw chicken can be by the time you get them. So the only benefit you'll have of dipping your chicken in water and rinsing it is to infect your kitchen sink. It has no basis in science. It is an old wives' tale. So you're correct on that one. It's a bad idea, horrible idea. Don't do it.
I was taught that too.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's probably a holdover from when people actually killed their own food. We don't do that anymore, clearly, or not many of us at least. So I will say, notice that this is getting a little gross here. I'm sorry if this is triggering anyone. If you really hate raw meat, you probably, I don't know why you come to this class, but there's a little bit of, it's blood mixed with water. Essentially, it's not all just like straight up blood that's coming out of the cavity of this chicken. So let's take a look in there. So normally, I'm sure you guys are all familiar, if you cooked a turkey, inside of here, there is often a turkey neck and a package full of giblets and other weird assorted liver and heart, stuff like that, kidneys. I'm just scraping my hand in here, and it's a great idea to cut your nails before you do this because no one wants chicken underneath their fingernails. That's just a practical side note. And to see if there's anything in here. This one had almost nothing, so that's awesome. Normally turkeys, though, they'll stuff the turkey neck in there, which is long and kind of scary looking, but I always save it to make stock out of, which I'll then make gravy out of. Have you guys ever done that before, or is that just me? No one has to answer up.
No, I've done that.
Yeah. Pro tip, it's a great idea because it's like so much more flavorful than stock you buy. I also do that with my chickens. So, little chicken anatomy here. These are his legs, and that's his insides. This is where his butt was, her butt probably. And we will probably cut off these little flats, like pieces of like mostly skin, because honestly, they're never going to crisp up and no one wants to eat them anyways, and just throw them into the stock we'll make with the turkey spine, the chicken spine. And these are the breasts, and these are the wing tips, the wings, and inside of here, the drumettes, if you're familiar with your chicken wing terminology, drumsticks, and thighs, so they're legs. Eddie's gonna check temperature here. Another pro tip, if you guys see the smoke billowing behind me, actually you don't, that's probably perfectly fine, is that when we cook this, it's a really good idea to put things like onions, carrots, celery, stuff you kind of put in to like make chicken stock underneath your chicken as it cooks, because then the dripping and all the fat will go onto them and it'll kind of like, well, just make really tasty roasted vegetables, and it will help the drippings from burning, because we also cook this at a really high temperature. Okay, we ready to proceed with surgery? How are we feeling? Ready to see this happen? Okay, so I will note one thing, that chickens are easier to cut because their bones are smaller than turkeys, and the larger your turkey, the harder the bones are to remove. Is it cooked? What did it get to? 159. Okay, so maybe a little over, but not bad. It's still under 165, so it will do great. Do you mind tinting it in foil, hun? I guess we can just leave it out because it's fine. Often when my chicken or turkey comes out of the oven, I'll be like, great, let's just tent it loosely in some foil and let it sit there for half an hour so then I won't burn my hands trying to cut it up later. It's really advised. Okay, so this is what's gonna happen with our chicken. We see its legs, its wings, and its legs. We are going to remove down, like you're giving a little chicken massage, there's the spine, and we're gonna go cut on either side of the spine, and that seems wrong, but I will show you why it makes so much sense. So this is a boning knife. It has a really flexible, what's it called? Blade, there we are. You can also use a chicken, like poultry shears or like really good chicken scissors, and it's pretty easy actually with actual chicken. Turkeys, you have to need a really good pair of poultry shears or just a good knife. And I'm really lucky because Eddie sharpens our knives all the time, and so they're always really sharp. But if your knives are dull, like go take them to get sharpened or sharpen them yourself before attempting this, because that's when you end up in the emergency room. Okay, so we found the spine. We're gonna take our knife just to the little bit to the side of the spine and press. And because this knife is super sharp, you'll notice that it just goes straight through. I'm so sorry if you're hearing some weird bone cutting noises, but that's what's happening. So, and we're just kind of crunching our way through. Checking, yep, we're still there. So we're just performing some really rough surgery. Spine removal. Probably people don't normally sign up for that. I'm kind of down close to the thigh now. And it's getting a little hard to cook through, so I'm just kind of, this knife is kind of just meant to go where it's easy to go through. It's kind of going to go through. Oh, there we go. To the other side. So this is a little crazy looking. That's why. We're going to cut all the way through. And I'm just taking off some of this gross, like, I don't know, fat. Like, it's not really going to crisp up. There's no reason for it to be there. Oh, that's the inside of the chicken. All right, so next thing is we're going to go to the other side, grab firm on its neck, and we're going to cut along the other side of this chicken spine. And just kind of glide down along the spine. You'll be cutting through little small rib bones. That's totally fine. And just kind of, you're using chicken shears also, it's just really easy to go. It's probably even easier than a knife, but I don't own a great pair of chicken or poultry shears, so and that's why they exist.
And Loy, if you don't own them, we probably don't own them either.
I mean, I know, it's like, I'm also just kind of minimal in what, I don't know, like, oh man, look at that, it's kind of scary looking on the inside. All right. So if it gets a little hard to go on one side, I normally just go to the other side and just work up to that point, but we're making it. That sounded a little gross. Can you guys actually hear these noises, or is my like headphones like kind of masking it? A little bit. Eddie says a little bit.
Yeah, your headphones are masking it a little.
All right, so we have removed the spine. It does not need to look beautiful. Like it does not need to be a perfect cut. It is purely functional. And I have a little Ziploc here that I have my other chicken neck in. And voila, we have opened up the chicken, which is kind of weird. Normally I'll take a paper towel and I'll just kind of like, I don't know, rub any of the, if you see a little bit of some organs still there, like, well, it's kind of gross. Kind of give it a wipe. Great. Okay, throw this away. All right, you guys ready to see the genius of this? Is we're gonna flip it over. And our chicken is like happily flat. The next thing to do is really fun and oddly satisfying as well, as we are going to give our chicken CPR. So this is like its little sternum, and we're gonna press down really hard on it. And it's easier to do a chicken than a turkey, but you know, think of CPR, like put your weight into it. Yep. And you will hear a nice big crunch. So did you guys hear that crunch? Was it just me? All right, you heard it. Britta looked thrilled. I don't know about anyone else. So, okay, there's our flat chicken. And you may be wondering, Loy, why did we make this chicken flat? The reason is it will help it cook evenly in the oven. So normally when it's in the oven, air has to get like through the chicken, but it's like, especially if you have stuffing in there, like how is the air going to circulate in the oven to like cook it all? By putting it flat, you allow the breast and everything to cook evenly and to not overcook the breast. And it also allows it to cook in like a quarter of the time. That chicken, how long did it take to cook, huh? 40 minutes to cook a chicken? I mean, I realize it's easier to go to Costco and just get a rotisserie chicken, but that is really fast chicken. So yes. Yeah, and the turkey will cook in under 2 hours. Normally for me, about 1 hour and 30 minutes to 1 hour and 45 minutes, sometimes even 1 hour and 20 minutes. And I've done this for 5 years now, this style of turkey. So it goes really fast.
Is there,
yeah.
So I know there's a formula that typically is when you're roasting a turkey per pound, you roast it for so long. Is there a formula for if you do this butterfly and you flatten it? Like, is it a different per pound? Like you do so many minutes per pound?
The short answer is no. Because that was normally because you're baking your turkey at 350, like everything else in the world. It takes a really long time and you give you a formula by pound. But for this, because it takes so little time, like if you're doing like a 12-pound turkey or a 10-pound turkey, which honestly, it's hard to find turkeys smaller than that, I would just reduce the cooking time by like I don't know, a solid 10 to 15 minutes per pound, starting at an hour 45. So I would start checking it earlier. But I have, at least from the recipes that I've followed and who taught me this method, I've never seen a by the pound formula, mostly just because there's not that much math involved because it's so fast. You don't have to calculate. Is it 6 or 8 hours the turkey is in the oven? Yeah, so it just goes really fast. I mean, you saw that, like we could have even cooked that like a couple degrees less. It will still be juicy because of the next thing I'm going to show you, which is if we're going to have first big takeaway. Yes, sorry.
One more question from
Yeah.
Denise. Does
Yes.
this method work the same if you're using a roaster oven?
Okay, so I'm going to be perfectly honest. I've never used a roaster oven to cook a turkey. So how do you know how hot your roaster oven goes? Like, does it just
No,
go up to
we
350
we
or?
just got
Yeah.
one from we got it from Sherilyn Metzger before she left. And so we've never
Okay.
used one before, but we were thinking of maybe using it for the turkey.
Yeah, I mean, the main reason people use a roaster oven is that way your oven is open to do other sides, which is smart, but it's normally meant for you to like stick a huge bird in there and have it in there for multiple hours. It's not the worst method, but I don't think it's not as effective, I think, for this like spatchcock turkey, because the spatchcock turkey is going to take up a lot more like horizontal space, which I don't know how big your roaster is. You'd have to kind of eyeball it. And I'd probably still want to have it in like some kind of thing that lifts it up off the very bottom of the roaster oven, like some kind of rack or something. And I think if you were to do this, and I can give you more instruction later, Denise, I would go ahead and not spatchcock it. But I will show you the next step, which is to dry brine it, which is like, there's like two things. Like, you can either spatchcock it and you cook it really quick in your oven, and that way, while it rests, you can just kind of throw your other things in to warm up. Or if you have too big of a bird, the other takeaway is to dry brine, which allows the salt to get sucked into the meat in advance. That way it doesn't go dry, even if it has a prolonged cooking time, at least not as dry. And it will taste much more seasoned because the salt has actually made it past the skin. You don't have this like really salty skin and really bland turkey. Does that make sense? So we will probably do a bit of troubleshooting about how to do a larger bird or use a different thing at the end. But I'm going to stick with, I'm going to show you how to dry brine, which should, if anything, huge big takeaway number 2 is how to dry brine. So what I'm first going to do to have our beautiful chicken here is and this is also maybe a little bit triggering for people, but I'm going to slide my fingers in between the chicken skin and the meat. And I normally just kind of stick a couple fingers in, and it's oddly satisfying. There's kind of like this membrane down here, and you're just trying to like separate this membrane from the skin without, if you can help it, tearing the skin on this chicken. And I'm just gonna work my way around this chicken. You don't have to get it perfect and everywhere, but the more places you can separate it means that you can shove salt down there, and it will not just make the skin super salty, but actually get through to the meat. So don't mind me. It's not really the most glamorous thing in the world, but just kind of stick your hand in there, which makes sense because if you've ever seen other things, like you just like salt the skin, you're like, how does the meat get through the salt, get through the skin? Salt get through the big old skin. So I'm just kind of my way around. If anyone has questions, this is going to take me a minute. So it's also fine if you don't have questions. Has anyone done this before, separated the skin from the meat? Oh yeah, I actually do stuff herbs often into the space in between the skin and the meat. But I normally, and this by preference, when I do this, and this is the other thing, I do this the night before I intend to bake it. So I will bake this chicken off tomorrow because that allows time for the salt to penetrate into the meat. Time is your biggest friend here. And sometimes I have just salted it, and then the next day I've just kind of stuffed in some herbs. I've actually done a really wonderful, like I minced rosemary, thyme, sage, garlic, stuff it in between this and the skin. And that way your herbs don't dry out as much when they're in the oven, because it's also cooking really hot. We cook it at 450 degrees, which is rocking. It is hot. And most herbs will burn. Or You can sprinkle herbs on after, like right before cooking. You can cook it on, put it on like right before you cook it on the skin, and then just cover it with foil a little bit as it cooks to make sure it doesn't over brown. Does that answer your question? Hopefully. But yeah, you can, we'll get into this in a few minutes. You can add a whole bunch of stuff. Yay.
Lee Galloway says, do you ever stuff rosemary or sage inside also?
Inside also, no, mostly just because like there's just not really an inside. It's going to be cooked flat. And so if you want to stuff something inside, stuff it in between the skin and the meat, like in this pocket. And then when you cut it, you'll have like a nice little herb ring and your crispy skin. Also, huge benefit to cooking it this way is that you have way more crispy skin than in a traditionally cooked bird, because there's just more surface area that's not getting dripped on or getting soggy. The stuff that's underneath it, like no one's going to eat this part, because when you cut out a chicken, which I'll show you in a few minutes, this is kind of gets thrown into the turkey pot to make soup. Okay, so now Eddie's gonna, if you see another hand, it's Eddie's. It really helps to have a second person. It can be done with one person, it's just more difficult. I'm gonna open up this little space and he's gonna chuck some salt down here. And it's really important what kind of salt you use, which anyone knows me knows that I probably have opinions about salt. I do. Use kosher salt. All right, put that down there. And then I'm gonna stick my hands back in here and give this turkey a little massage so the chicken gets, I can't remember what poultry we're doing. We're doing chicken. Gets all the way down as far as I can. I could use a little more salt. So yeah, the reason to have someone else like dumping in the salt is that way you can have two chicken hands. You're not trying to keep a clean hand and a chicken hand. So also, that's the other thing. So kosher salt, it's really hard to over salt because talking about tablespoons or teaspoons of salt. So I never measure, but it's depending on how big your turkey is, I'd say use about if you're using kosher salt, about a half teaspoon of kosher salt per pound of meat. So think about how big your bird is. We'll do a little more over here. But that could be tablespoons of salt. This bird isn't huge, right? It's only like what, 4 to 5 pounds. Let's do a little bit on the back too, why not? But you know, it's some big pinches. And the great thing about kosher salt, it has larger crystals, which actually are less salty. It just takes up like its volume is less, right? Because it's greater because it just has bigger flakes than iodized salt. And it's really hard to oversalt. Also, this chicken will absorb as much salt as it can, and then it just won't absorb the rest. It'll just drip off with the fat when it's cooked tomorrow, and it won't get too salty. That doesn't mean like put a cup of salt on here, but like don't be worried about, just worry about the fact that you get salt evenly everywhere and liberally. So yeah, and pretty much once you rub it and you can feel grains of salt everywhere, you've done it. And also the salt will kind of dissolve, which is sort of the point. Yeah, so tomorrow, actually let's put a little bit of salt on the skin. This will, when we put salt on things, it draws moisture out of cells. And it also draws, so putting salt on this and allowing it exposed to air will cause the skin to dry out, which means when it hits high heat tomorrow, it will crisp up beautifully. Like that kind of crispy chicken skin you always wish you could get normally. That is what you will achieve. And it will also draw salt into like this protected meat under here. It will draw it into the meat, causing it to season and be just taste really flavorful instead of bland. And it will help it retain moisture when it hits heat tomorrow. So now we transport our chicken. Eddie's doing a nice little switcheroo for me, a little chicken baby. Onto our sheet pan. So I have, as you notice, is like an old sheet pan, but it perfectly fits this is a half sheet pan, which is probably the sheet pan you guys most have. It has a rim on it, which is important because like chicken juices that a cooling rack fits into. And I get my little chicken and I lay him down. And it's not perfectly even because I didn't do a perfectly even job cutting, but it just truly doesn't matter. And I'm going to take his wings, I'm going to tuck them under so he doesn't fly away. And that also helps so the wingtips don't get burnt, is the main reason. It's obviously not going to fly. And if you have a bigger bird, you can kind of position him how you need, but that keeps the wingtips from burning if you tuck them under. And you can always tuck them in again if they come out tomorrow when you cook it. And yeah, so now what we're gonna do is stick it in the fridge. What? Oh, should we actually want to just grab that foil over here? Oh, so this is another thing I wish I'd remembered when I did mine last night, is putting foil underneath the sheet pan, because when it cooks tomorrow, you'll either have to really scrub your sheet pan, which I'm gonna have to do later. Just put a little foil under here, and we're gonna put it into the fridge. Can you get that in there better, huh? Put it in the fridge, like uncovered, which probably feels so wrong. But we're not gonna put any food next to it. And it has this nice rim here, so if anything drips, it's not gonna drip onto your vegetables and just like clear out a whole fridge space for it. I'm gonna wash my hands and I'll show you how I put it in my fridge, which you can see is super full. Just a second. Any questions, by the way, now that we've got the brining part done?
Why uncovered?
It allows air to dry out the chicken skin, which is kind of the whole point, to get crispy skin. And also, there's just no way that salmonella or anything is gonna fly around your fridge and like contaminate your food. It's only going to if it drips on it, which is why then the rimmed baking sheet is really important. Yeah, so it helps it dry out, which just helps it crisp better. Like, you know, if you sear a steak, you want the steak to be nice and dry on the outside so it doesn't just like splatter all the time. That's the same reason for chicken skin. That's another reason why rinsing a chicken in a sink is a bad idea, because you just have wet chicken that you'll like never be able to dry out. That doesn't add any flavor, just adds water. So, okay. Off to the fridge, and I'll show you. Can you use a broiler pan? Depends how big your chicken is. And yeah, just depends how big your broiler pan is. My broiler pan isn't that big. Are you talking about the one that's like the broiler pan that comes with the oven, or the one that's underneath your oven if you have like a gas?
It's one that like you can buy separately and like put into your oven.
Oh, see, I've never had one of those, so I can't totally speak for it.
2 layers, and if you don't have like a rack, it's still got the 2 layers.
Oh yeah,
like a layer on top with some holes
you
in
can
it.
totally do that. I think it'll be harder to clean, but maybe not. The idea is just the reason we cook it on the rack and we dry it on the rack is so it's not sitting in its juices, and it allows it to dry and allow hot air to circulate underneath it. So whatever setup you have that allows the chicken to be mostly flat and have air circulation, it's fine with me. This is just a setup I have that works. So, all right, off to, oh gosh, gotta look at my like fridge over here. The fridge. The chicken parts were put there. So I have cleared off, you can't actually see, can you put it down? It has a whole rack all to itself down here. So, and it's a piece of crap. Okay, well, some yogurt just fell on it, so guess we're washing that. Fun times. Yeah, so if you can dedicate a whole rack to it, like, or, you know, if your porch is cool enough, just like put it on your like porch overnight, unless you think maybe lightly cover it or something. Sorry, just cleaning this yogurt. Okay. All right, well, next step is I'm going to sanitize down my workspace because I cooked with raw poultry here, and I'm going to show you guys how to cut up the chicken after it's out of the oven. Do you guys have any questions now that we've gotten through the raw chicken part? I should note one more thing. This is how long you should let your chicken be in the fridge or in a cool place. So like if it's cool enough on your porch and you don't think squirrels will eat it, but why would squirrels eat chicken? Okay. Is about 12 hours, or like 8 to 12 hours, as long as 24, even 36 hours. But I don't know if anyone has that much fridge space all the time. So I would probably say if you can get it in like the night before, even 6 to 8 hours of the salt penetrating will make a huge difference on how juicy and flavorful your bird is tomorrow on Thanksgiving. And that being said, even I do this with every single type of meat that I cook. If I can, I will salt it in advance. Even just a half an hour of it sitting on a counter with salt on it will make it be significantly juicier and more seasoned. With a larger bird like this, I think it is helpful to make it go longer overnight, and you probably can't, obviously should not leave it on your counter for 12 hours. So yeah, any questions on timing or dry brining?
I have a question about after you take it out of the oven and you let it rest.
Yes.
What sort of time range? Like I feel like in recipes I've read, they're like, let it rest for 10 minutes. Do you have,
yeah.
Yeah, just like what's kind of the rules around letting it rest?
So there are no super rules, but I will tell you the general guidelines that are, if you cover it with foil, because you know, if you cover it with foil, if you know you have longer that you need to use your oven for before you want to eat. So if it's done in advance, just like loosely tent it with foil. We're not talking about tight, but like loose so it doesn't steam, but it kind of helps retain some heat. And it can be there for a half an hour, 45 minutes. How long have we done, Hannah? Have we gone longer than that? Probably about a half hour, even up to 45 minutes. Honestly, the cooler the bird is, the easier it is to cut, because hot chicken juice is unpleasant on your hands.
Is that timeline the same for turkeys?
Yeah, so turkeys are bigger. They'll hold their heat longer. And also, if you want it to cool down quickly, you can do what I did, where I just didn't cover it at all, and it's cooling down, and that will be ready in 10 minutes, 15 minutes to touch. But ultimately, you can let it hold over a long time. But you also can kind of do it by feel, like light. If you're worried about your turkey, just loosely tent it. And then just like touch it when you think it's like you've got half an hour done, touch it. If it's really hot still, because you have a large bird, like just let it wait longer, or take the foil off and let it cool down a bit more. But yeah, there is no hard and fast rule for resting. If you can let it rest at least 10 minutes, I think you're good. I just don't think you'd want to touch a bird coming out of a 450 oven any sooner than 10 minutes after it's been out of the oven, because it's really hot. So does that help? Great. Oh, guys, look at this. So this is our chicken. It's a little funny because it's flat, but the skin is like, hear that? It's all sorts of crispy, which is kind of great. Okay.
We did rip it down in foil.
Oh, that's the other thing. So right before I put it down, put it in the oven. This is an optional but delicious step, is I took a little bit of oil. I think we used olive oil, but you could use vegetable oil, probably not coconut oil, unless you want a weird coconut chicken. Or that could be good, maybe. Rub it down, like lube it up in a bit of oil, just on the skin parts that are facing the top. And if you want, you could throw on some black pepper, some herbs. You could take that opportunity to stuff like herbs and garlic like underneath the skin and the meat. But a little bit of oil on the top just helps things get pretty, which, yeah, it's nice. Okay, so this is cool enough I can touch it, which is great, actually. You can see, not super well because I have a really gross sheet pan, but there is some chicken juices down here, which is great. I'm probably just gonna load all my finished chicken onto here as I cut it and figure out where we want to put it. I'm gonna put it off to the side because this is like my oldest sheet pan from college and it's pretty gross. Okay, so
would you ever save those drippings for
totally
the gravy?
Oh yeah, so this is what, if I had my head on straight this when I was cooking this today, I would have cut up an onion, a couple ribs of celery, and a little bit of carrot, just small enough that it can fit underneath the sheet pan. And that way, when the chicken drippings came onto it, it would soften those and would kind of like make a almost like pan juice and would keep the moisture in as opposed to just kind of evaporating in the hot oven. And then strain that off, like scrape it into a wire mesh strainer and like pour it into my gravy for like drippings. It's like instant concentrated stock. Would recommend. I wish I'd thought of it or remembered it rather today. Oh, I need to wash that. Okay. I'm going to wash my boning knife because like it was easy for taking the raw chicken apart, it's also really useful for, what's it called? It's really useful for cutting up a cooked chicken. I'm just going to strip this down really good. What? Yeah, I think I'll use both, but just to get the breasts out. I look a little scary here with my knife. All right. You can also use a chef's knife. So I'll show you the 2 knives I'd probably use for this. Which knife should I use? Victorinox Deliverables. I just love this knife. Okay, this is my chef's knife. It's a Japanese chef's knife, but you could use any big knife. Don't use a serrated knife, please. That's for bread. It will just kind of saw your turkey, your chicken, which I don't think we need to do. All right, so time for chicken surgery part 2, but it is cooked and delicious this time. We are going to remove, and look, it's just gonna kind of pop off the legs, and then we'll move the breasts, and we'll move the legs and the wings, and we'll remove the breasts. So see the space right here? It's kind of wiggling around. It's already wanting to come off. Oh yeah. And also, if it's cooked well enough, it just kind of pops off. I barely touched my knife to that. So do you want this cut all the way up or just in? If you want, at this point, this is called a leg quarter. You can just kind of fit your knife in between where the drumstick and the thigh is, and just kind of, it will fall into the little knuckle and kind of wiggle it around. Turkey carving and chicken carving does not need to be gorgeous. Just kind of needs to get the job done. All right, so now we have a breast and a thigh. Oh my gosh, that skin. Yep, no, it's a drumstick and a thigh. I know my chicken anatomy. Thanks. I just forgot. Yeah, oh man, I really want to just eat these, but I'm not that hungry. Okay, putting those over here. We'll just move you over so you can see my progress as I cut things up. All right, next up, look at, it's her chicken wing. The wing tip, no one really likes eating. That's actually, okay, just kidding. That's the cook's treat. There's just like this little piece of meat right here. Oh, that's pretty good. Then we'll take off the chicken wing. You're just watching me eat this little piece of meat. I'm sorry. You have to get something when you're like really hungry and cooking all the way through. All right, whoops, there comes the chicken wings. That's the other thing. Cooked chicken just like falls apart. It's juicy. It's also really juicy. This is the wing. Then we'll get the drumette. You guys hearing lots of weird chicken cutting noises over here again? Not too bad. All right. Sounds perfect as when you get a chicken wing, like buffalo wings here, but yeah, those can just be kind of put to the side. Okay, on to the other side. Turkeys are like the same anatomy as chickens, except for their long neck, but you're not using that here. And they're just bigger. Oh, look, that just popped right off. Also can't express if like a properly cooked turkey, a chicken, shouldn't be that hard to cut. I'm just kind of finding, it's like the bones almost want to fall out. It's like tender and juicy. Also, did I mention this chicken took 40 minutes? Like so fast for a whole chicken. All right, there's our drumstick. And you just kind of wedge your knife in until it feels like it's in the crevice, and then just kind of wiggle it around and it'll come out. Oh man, that looks great. We'll organize it by type of meat here. Drumsticks. All right, we're getting out chicken wing number 2. We'll take off the tip for the cook. We'll take off the wing over here. The drumette. Oh, it's so tender, doesn't even want to, whoops. Okay, this happens sometimes. The whole bone just pulled out because it was so tender. All right. Right, chicken meat, come out. This is really awesome. Okay, I should stop talking about this. All right, next thing. This is probably the hardest thing is taking out the breast, but it's actually not that hard because it's flat. Remember how we flattened this? You're not cutting something as crazily round and three-dimensional, which is the other reason, if you can, you totally should spatchcock your chicken. So we're gonna locate the sternum. It's the crevice right here, yeah? And we're gonna take our knife and we're gonna kind of hold it at almost a, geez, think about angles, geometry, I don't know, like 45-ish degree angle. And we're gonna kind of slide it down along the rib cage and down by the breastbone and slide this whole piece of meat out, and then we'll slice it up. And I actually might not slice this one because I'm gonna eat it tomorrow because it's kind of late. Wow, I've been talking a really long time. Okay. I'm just kind of sliding it down. A whole bunch of juice is coming out. Oh man, look at that. Ah, it's hot on the inside. Okay, even though this cooled for a while. Then as you get down towards the end, you're gonna kind of slide it to be almost parallel with the cutting board. You're just gonna cut it out of the ribs. That's the chicken tender we see kind of falling out here. Okay. Sometimes I actually like to wear like rubber gloves, not like the cleaning ones, but like the hospital style ones while cutting a hot bird, because it just makes the chicken juice not burn as much. This is if you're really rushing. Hopefully you're not rushing though. And we'll get it out of here. Come on, chicken. Doesn't have to come out perfect, but, and as you notice, I'm like not an expert carver by like any means, and you really don't have to be. Look, all right, go back in there. I don't know if you guys can totally see this, but this chicken is like really juicy. You can't really tell. It's beautiful though. And we will put this aside. It's like dripping, it's so juicy. But that's not a bad thing. You also notice it's not like pink. It has a little blush to it, but it's totally normal. And we cooked it hot enough. Are you guys familiar with like the danger zone? It's like things kept from like 45 to 145 are like, that's the time, that's the temperature where microbes will want to grow. And so if you can get it over 145 for more than, for like a couple minutes or so, almost everything will die, which is great for our little chicken here, because we didn't have to cook it all the way up to like 165, 180 or 170 for it to get completely cooked. And you will not get sick from this turkey, unlike humongous turkeys that are improperly cooked. That, yeah, spatchcocking also just cooks it really evenly. So, all right, we have our chicken breast, and this, oh my gosh, is really good, and can be turned into chicken soup. You can pull off the little bits of meat, feed it to your dog, I don't know, your child, or just throw it into a pot and make chicken stock. So that is it, guys. That is how you make a really easy, simple poultry. It can be chicken, it can be bird. And then if you want, you can take this chicken breast and like slice it up, give people quarters, halves, however you want to eat it. Eat it whole, you know. Yeah, okay, any questions? Because I realized I blathered on a lot longer than I thought I would. I shouldn't eat this chicken, it's really good.
We could definitely see the juices. You were like,
Yeah.
oh, you could see how juicy. We could see it on your hands too. It's just-
Yeah, my hands are like dripping with juices right now. I'm gonna wash them so I stop picking at this chicken. Yeah, has anyone here tried this method of spatchcocking or dry brining, either of those methods? I'm just wondering if this is a totally new thing.
I've done the dry brining before, but somebody helped me with it.
How did it, wait, did I help you with it or did it help you with it?
Someone else helped me. I think it was my mother-in-law.
Okay, how did it turn out for you?
It was good. I just remember it being kind of gross to do.
Yeah, most things involving raw birds are slightly gross, unfortunately,
looks really
especially
good.
whole ones. Yeah. Oh, thank you. Yeah. Denise says, nope, we've never tried. Hey, Paula. Guys, it's so good to see you. Even though I'm
I have I've done the separating the skin and the meat thing.
Yeah.
But I put butter in there. Like it was a recipe that had you put butter and salt and herbs. So I made a mix with butter and salt and herbs, and then I crammed it in between the skin and the meat.
Was that delightful?
It was really, really good. But
Yeah.
would that be considered dry brining?
So kind of and kind of not. So did you do that right before you put it in the oven, or did you do it in advance?
I did it right before I put it in the oven.
So this is how I would adjust that method to make it better. Is the night before, I would do the same thing where you separate the skin and the meat, and I'd salt it. And then the next day, I would mix up your butter and herbs and garlic, or like whatever is going into it, but don't add salt because you've already salted it. Or you could use unsalted butter. You can probably even use salted butter unless you're using like a ridiculous amount. Where, and I would not shame you, I would do the same thing, but like, just to control the salt level a little bit, and mix that mixture, like push that mixture underneath the skin and the meat. But yeah, but if you salt it in advance, you kind of get twofers because you get all of the salt absorbed into it for flavor, and then the butter will just sink into it as like another layer of flavor. I'm highly considering doing that this year. So that sounds great.
Lori,
Yes.
I am very late to this party, so this question may have already come up.
You're
but
good.
I've wet brined mine every year, and last year we decided it was too salty. Like it made the gravy really salty. So does this cut down on the salt that would be available in the drippings for the gravy?
Like kind of. It depends on your turkey. So sorry, line of questioning. Do you know if your turkey was already brined? Like, was it injected with the saline solution?
Good question. I think we used a butterball.
Most of those are, because they the reason they do is because people who don't know about brining will normally end up with a moister turkey because they've already injected salt water into it, right?
Yeah.
But if you brine it, what I would do is I would just use a little less salt, but use a dry brine. I feel like it's also so much less messy. You don't have to dig a turkey out of water, salt water nonetheless. I've done that too. We had to use a 5-gallon bucket. It was gross.
Yeah, we used one of our food storage buckets that was empty and just, stuck it out in the garage, and, somehow leaving the bird in the garage too was just kind of gross, but I don't know.
Yeah, I remember doing that as a kid with my dad. Like Alton Brown, you guys familiar? He had like a recipe for how to wet brine a turkey and have all of these like spices and like whole garlic cloves.
That's whose recipe I use.
Is it? Okay, it's a great recipe. It produces a wonderful bird, but they also, because more recent years, they have started injecting turkeys and most poultry, but admittedly not these Costco chickens, with a saline solution, so they can sell you by the pound basis, essentially more water. And it will make a saltier turkey. So just ease a little bit up on the salt, but because you're doing it so far in advance, and the chicken's only really going to absorb as much salt as it can take. Like the cells, there's like a limit.
It maxes out. Yeah.
Yeah. And it's also, if you're not introducing extra moisture, I feel like you have a better chance of not oversalting by using a dry brine, but maybe just not like, you will still probably need to use a solid tablespoon or 2 of salt, but it's ultimately way less than you're using in a wet brine, right?
That other one was like a half a box of kosher salt. It's a ton of salt.
It's a ton. It's like commitment level salt portions there. Also, you can't use that for anything afterwards, just turkey water.
Right.
Yeah. So.
Okay. Well, thank you.
I've always found that it just turns out really seasoned. You do end up with less drippings this way just because it's not cooking for as long. But if you do the method where you like cut up an onion, not like perfectly or anything, and like a celery, a carrot, just some like aromatics on the bottom of your sheet pan, it will drip into it and it'll kind of steam and like collect all of these beautiful like concentrated juices. You can just kind of like pour into your gravy.
Okay.
So yeah.
Cool. Thank you.
You're welcome. It's good to see you.
Thank you, Loy. That was really enlightening for me, at least.
Cool. I'm glad. I realize I've been doing this for a while. Does anyone here own the Food Lab? Do you know what that is? It's a cookbook.
Oh, I bought it and I gave it to my son.
Okay, well,
But I've
I'll
got that
just-
heat, that heat. What's that other one? Light feet. Heat,
Salt,
light,
fat,
salt,
acid, heat.
that one. Yeah.
Yeah.
Does that have
This
anything?
one is
Okay.
where I learned the method from, and Britta is making a Google Doc with like recipes and tips and stuff, and it may only just have one link to it, but I will link you to this way to make a really fast turkey, and it's scaled for a turkey, so it includes cooking times for a turkey as opposed to a chicken, so you can kind of scale that depending on how big your turkey is, like subtract or add time to it by like 10 or 15 minutes a pound. And it's so easy. And he talks about how to put the aromatics in the bottom, to dry brine it, to spatchcock it. Yeah, it's super. And it's in this like tome of a book. It's huge. It's also at Costco right now. I randomly noticed.
Food
So
Lab, that it is.
it is. I saw
I
it
got
at
it there
Costco.
a couple years ago and gave it
It's
to my organic chemistry minded son. So
oh, he probably thinks it's awesome. It's really in depth.
Mhm.
I think it's great. Most people are probably like, wow, that's a lot of words about one thing. But yeah, like here he has like a whole like little step-by-step med about how to spatchcock a chicken. And the same principle goes for turkey. And you can also, and I'll link to the website on the blog that talks about how to instant read thermometer knife sharpener. Yeah. What should we say about knife sharpener? Eddie has a very complicated setup that I think most people would not want to do. He has like 5 different whetstones that he like cycles through, and I don't even want to do it. So that should be some gauge for that. Just find a knife sharpener that works for you. There's like ones you like pull through, like kind of like something you hold and pull through. You can use the electric ones. It actually doesn't really matter what kind of knife sharpener you use, just that it works and you can use it, or it's a service you can like drop it by. Just have a sharp knife. I will include a recipe or the link to some good thermometers in a couple different price ranges, like some cheap ones, and like the one I would use if I, like that I used to use in my lab, which was awesome. Yeah. Any other questions? Is this how you're all gonna cook your chickens or turkeys for Thanksgiving this year? Have I convinced you to try one of these methods?
I'm totally going to do this spatchcock. Is that how you say it?
Yes, you can also call it butterfly. It's a very nice way to say it. Spatchcock is just, like I said, really fun to say.
Wait, how do we find? There's their little really pretty picture.
Oh, look at that.
I missed the spatchcock part. So I'm like, what the heck are you talking about? So I
Yeah.
there
No,
it is.
spatchcocking just means like, yeah,
So
take it out
I
the
recorded-
stove and smash it flat.
We
So-
recorded this meeting, and so we'll post the video or a link to the video. I'm not exactly sure how we're going to post it yet. So you can see from the beginning to the end. And we'll also post a link to the Google Doc that collects the information that Loy is going to share. So everyone can have access to it. And we'll post those links on our Facebook page. So if there are no more questions,
Thank you,
Lee Galloway
Loy.
said something. She said, Lunds does free sharpening for 2 knives. You leave them and pick them up later.
That's
Where do you
cool.
go? Where do you go at Lund's to drop them off?
And is that every time you go to lunch or just like 2 knives and then you're in the system and you can't do it anymore?
That'd be cool.
Meat cutter. Oh, by the meat cutter?
Okay.
No, whatever you want. Sweet.
Hmm.
Maybe I'll bring my whole family grocery shopping and everyone can bring 2 knives.
Or you
I
could
just have
put
these
it at all
knives.
the different Lens around. You could go to White
So how do you not
Castle.
get caught by the security guard? Just kidding. He's putting in your purse or something.
Oh,